So let's proceed for the chapter Human Health and Disease. In this chapter, we will be talking about various kinds of diseases, what are immunities, what are its factors, and we will also talk about drugs and alcohols. Let us first talk about what is health. It is a complete state of physical, mental, and social well-being of an individual. It ensures productivity and longevity. Basically, there are three factors that contribute for good health. First one is genetic reason that that includes innate deficiency and inheritable defects, then infections caused by pathogens, and the third one is sedentary lifestyle such as junk food, consumption of alcohols and drugs, lack of exercise, etc. Diseases can be classified into two categories: congenital disease and acquired disease. Congenital diseases are those diseases which are present in an individual right from the birth. We can include all genetic disorders such as the Down syndrome, sickle cell anemia, etc. in this category. Acquired diseases are diseases which are acquired during the lifetime of an individual. We classify them into two categories: infectious diseases, or also called as communicable diseases, and non-infectious or non-communicable diseases. Now we will be talking about certain communicable diseases, their causative organisms, and the symptoms that we see in those diseases. Let us first talk about all bacterial diseases. There are two bacterial diseases which are included in your curriculum. Number one is typhoid. Its causative organism is Salmonella typhi. And the most common symptoms that are noticed in the individuals are sustained high fever, headache, constipation. Intestinal perforations are also seen during severity of the disease. The disease spreads by food and water contaminated with the pathogen. And the confirmatory test which help in diagnosis of the disease is Widal test. Second, bacterial borne disease is pneumonia. There are two different types of bacteria that cause this disease. One is Streptococcus pneumoniae and the second one is Haemophilus influenzae. The symptoms are common in both the cases: fever, headache, grey bluish fingernails. This is seen during severity of the disease, and decrease in the respiratory efficiency. The disease spreads by inhaling the droplets of the strains of bacteria or using the articles used by the pathogen. Then let us proceed for the viral diseases. The first viral disease that we will be talking about is common cold, which is very common to all of us. The first the common cold is caused by rhinoviruses, and the most common symptoms are nasal discharge, sore throat, cough, headache, etc. It spreads by droplets, contaminated food and water. Now let us talk about two more viral diseases. One is dengue and the other one is chikungunya. Dengue is caused by flavivirus. During this disease, the common symptoms that are noticed are high fever, front headache, and joint pain. The disease is transmitted by Aedes aegypti mosquito, which acts as the vector for the disease. Chikungunya is also caused by virus, and the name of the virus is alpha virus. Here we notice the symptoms as fever, crippling joint pain, and lymphadenopathy. This is transmitted by Aedes aegypti mosquito, which also acts as vector for the disease. Now let us talk about the protozoan disease. The most common protozoan disease is malaria. It is caused by different varieties of different species of Plasmodium. One is Plasmodium vivax, second one is Plasmodium falciparum, and third one is Plasmodium malariae. These three are very common. Out of the three, even you can note down about the first two, which are most commonly seen in our surrounding: Plasmodium vivax and Plasmodium falciparum. The common symptoms are high fever, chills, shivering, And acute headache. The disease is transmitted by female Anopheles mosquito, which also acts as vector. Female Anopheles mosquito feed on human blood for getting the nutrition and in order to lay the fertilized eggs. Let us talk about the life cycle of Plasmodium. It uses two different hosts, that is why we also call it as digenetic. One host is mosquito, another host is human being. The bite of female Anopheles mosquito releases sporozoite of Plasmodium into our blood. This Plasmodium, the sporozoites of the Plasmodium travels to the liver, and inside the liver cells it multiplies asexually. Then once the liver cells burst, they attack the nearby RBC cells. In the RBC cells also they multiply asexually, and when the RBC cells rupture, they release a toxin. Every time the RBC cell ruptures, a toxin is released. The toxin is called as hemozoin. This is associated with fever and chills. Whenever hemozoin will be released, we will notice a cycle of fever and shivering. In the RBC cell, some of the sporozoites develop into gametocyte, and this is the beginning of the sexual stage. This gametocyte is taken up by another mosquito as their blood meal whenever this mosquito feed on the human blood. These gametocytes enter into the mosquito's body, they fertilize there, they develop into they fertilize and develop in the mosquito's gut. Mature infective stage, that is the sporozoites escape again from the intestine and migrate to the mosquito's salivary gland, and in the salivary gland they remain there. Whenever this mosquito bites another human, sporozoites are injected with the bite. This completes the life cycle of Plasmodium. Let's now talk about cancer. The process of development of cancer is called oncogenic transformation. Normal cells have the property of contact inhibition, in which the cells stop their growth whenever they come in contact with the other cells. But cancer cells lose this property. As a result, cancer cells divide continuously to give rise to a mass of cells called as tumors. So, what you need to remember is that cancer cells lose the property of contact inhibition. Let's now talk about tumors. Tumors are of two types, benign and malignant. A benign tumor is a tumor that is confined to a particular location and do not spread. They cause little damage to the body, whereas the malignant tumors are those tumors which show metastasis, that is, they are sloughed off cells, and these cells reach to different sites and cause new tumors. They starve the normal cells of vital nutrients. Malignant tumors actually represent cancer. The cells actively divide, grow, and starve the normal cells of vital nutrients. Let us now talk about the causes of cancer. Carcinogens are called cancer-causing agents, and they are of three types: chemical, biological, and physical. Some examples of chemical carcinogens are cigarette smoke, benzopyrene, dyes, etc. Biological carcinogens are viral oncogenes, which are present in the viruses and they cause cancer. There are Our normal cells also have proto-oncogenes, which are called C-oncogenes, which become active cancer-causing oncogenes on exposure to certain environmental factors. Then comes the physical carcinogen. They may be ionizing radiations, they may be non-ionizing radiations. in case of ionizing radiation, we can take the example of X-rays, gamma rays, etc. Whereas in case of non-ionizing radiations, we can take the example of UV rays. Let us now talk about cancer detection and diagnosis. Blood and bone marrow test to know elevation in number of cell count is very helpful in finding out the presence of the disease. Second diagnostic procedure is biopsy, where suspected tissue is cut and examined. The third technique is radiography, where usually we use X-rays. The fourth one is computed tomography, also called as CT scan, where we use X-rays to get 3D images. MRI is also used, which is a non-ionizing radiation. MRI also uses non-ionizing radiation and strong magnetic field to detect the cancer cells. Molecular biological technique to detect the inheritable susceptibility to certain cancer cells are also used for diagnosis. Cancer treatment is normally done through various ways. One of such step is surgery, where the removal of tumor to check further spread is done. The next one is radiotherapy. Tumor cells are irradiated to death. Third one is chemotherapy, where specific drugs are used for particular cancer cells, but it has many side effects. The most common one are hair fall, anemia, etc. Then immunotherapy, that is the biological modifiers such as the alpha interferon activate immune system to protect the body from further spread of cancer. Now let's talk about AIDS. Stands for Acquired Immunodeficiency Syndrome. It is caused by HIV. Stands for Human Immunodeficiency Virus. It is a retrovirus which has RNA as its genetic material. First reported case of AIDS was seen in USA in 1981. The transmission of HIV takes place through sexual contact with infected person, transfusion of contaminated blood, sharing of infected needles, infected mother to child through placenta, and there is a time lag between the infection and the appearance of the symptom. It may range from few months to years, normally 5 to 10 years. Mode of HIV infection. It means we are now talking about the replication of the virus. The virus enters the macrophages after entering the body of a person. In macrophages, macrophages act as HIV factory, viruses replicates inside macrophage, that is viral RNA changes into viral DNA by reverse transcriptase enzyme. Viral DNA incorporates into the host DNA and produce new viral particles. These viral particles then enter T lymphocyte and multiply. The T lymphocyte decrease in the body, reducing the immunity of the body. The treatment and diagnosis of AIDS. The most common test which is done is ELISA. ELISA stands for Enzyme-Linked Immunosorbent Assay. Antiretroviral drugs are partially effective and can prolong the life of an individual only. Now let's talk about immunity. It is the ability of the body to fight against disease-causing agents. Immunity is of two types, innate and acquired. Innate immunity is the immunity which is present in an individual right from birth. So it is inborn immunity. It is non-specific and it consists of 4 different types of barriers. Number 1 is physical barrier. Skin acts as first line of defense, and the mucous coating of respiratory tract, gastrointestinal tract and urinogenital tract prevent the entry of microbes into the body. The second one is physiological. Acid in the stomach, saliva in the mouth and tears from eyes They help us to protect our body from entry of the pathogen. The third one is cellular. Blood has polymorphonuclear leukocytes and tissue has macrophages. They protect our body from the entry of pathogens. The fourth one is cytokine. There are specialized proteins such as interferons which are released by the viral infected cells which prevent the non-infected cells from further viral infection. Let's now talk about acquired immunity. Acquired immunity is the immunity that an individual acquires during its lifetime. It is also called as adaptive immunity. It is pathogen specific, it is acquired during the lifetime, and it is based on the memory. Types of acquired immunity are of two: active immunity and passive immunity. Active immunity is developed by the body when it is exposed to antigens, living or dead. It is slow but long lasting and with no side effects. Artificial active immunity is done by a vaccination. Natural active immunity is developed in the body by natural infection occurring in the body, whereas passive immunity is done by ready-made antibodies. It is a fast but lasts for few days. Examples are antibodies IgA present in the colostrum, antibodies received by the fetus from mother through placenta. These are certain examples of passive immunity. Then we will be talking about immune responses. Our body shows two important immune responses. One is called as the primary immune response, second is called as the secondary immune response. When a pathogen for the first time infects a person, low intensity immune response is generated. This is called primary immune response. After every primary response, cell memory stores the details of the encounter, whereas secondary immune response is the response when the pathogen attacks again. High intense secondary response is generated. Cell memory of the first encounter helps in this secondary response. There are two basic types of cells which are involved in producing this kind of immune responses. One is called B lymphocyte cell, another is called T lymphocyte cell. B lymphocyte cells, they secrete specialized proteins called antibodies. These antibodies have 4 peptide chains, 2 heavy chains and 2 light chains. That is why they are represented as H2L2. Different types of antibodies are IgG, IgM, IgE, IgA, etc. I'm talking about the most common one. Out of that, the IgG type of antibodies protect from fungus and bacteria. IgE type of antibodies are involved in allergy reactions. IgM type of antibodies are required during blood transfusion, and IgA type of antibodies are involved in saliva, and they are found in saliva and secretions of nose and colostrum. Humoral immune response is the response of our immune system which involves antibodies found in the blood, whereas cell-mediated immune response is the immune response which involves the T lymphocyte cell. T cells help B cells to produce antibodies, and it can differentiate between self and non-self cells. That is why the cell-mediated immune system plays a vital role in graft rejection, whereas no role is being played by humoral immune response during graft rejection. Vaccination is another important area of acquired immunity. The basic principles involved in vaccination is the property of memory of immune system. These days we basically use recombinant DNA vaccines. With the help of this recombinant DNA vaccines, vaccines are produced on very large scale. There are certain advantage of recombinant DNA vaccine. Number one is that we get pure vaccines and it is very specific. Allergies are another part of acquired immunity, where you need acquired immunity. Allergy is the hypersensitive response to certain agents of the environment. Allergens are allergy-causing elements such as dust, smoke, etc. Antibodies which are involved in allergic reactions are IgE type of antibodies. During allergic reaction, histamine and serotonins are released. Symptoms are sneezing, watery eyes, breathing problems, etc. In order to reduce the symptom, antihistamine and adrenalines and steroids are given to the patient. Autoimmunity uh, is the immunity that the body generates against its own cells. So the body generates an immune response against its own cells, and this is called autoimmunity. It can be genetic. Example is rheumatoid arthritis. Now move on to the last topic of the chapter, drugs and alcohol abuse. There are some common drugs which are consumed in the society. The first one is opioid. The most common example of an opioid is heroin, or commonly called as smack. The source is acetylation of morphine extracted from the latex of poppy plant, biologically named as Papaver somniferum. It is consumed by snorting and injection, and the property of opioid is white, bitter, and it is odorless. The mode of action remains that it binds to the opioid receptors present in our central nervous system and gastrointestinal tract. The most common effect which is seen due to the consumption of opioids are opioid acts as depressant. It slows down the body functions. Morphine is an effective sedative painkiller and useful after surgery. The second category of drugs is cannabinoids. The source is inflorescence of cannabis sativa. It is consumed by inhaling or by oral ingestion. Mode of action is it binds to the cannabinoid receptors in the brain, and its effect is seen especially in the cardiovascular system. The most common example of cannabinoids are hashish, charas, ganja, etc. The next category of drugs is cocaine or coca alkaloids. Its source is coca plant, that is Erythroxylum coca. It is consumed by snorting, and mode of action remains as it interferes with transfer of neurotransmitters, especially this dopamine. Effect is it stimulates our central nervous system, produces the sense of increased energy, excess, but consuming excess of cocaine cause hallucination. Nicotine is another category of drugs present in tobacco. It is smoked, chewed, and snuffed. It stimulates the adrenaline and noradrenaline from adrenal glands. It increases the blood pressure and heart rate. Smoking increases the risk of the diseases such as emphysema, bronchitis, throat and lung cancer, increases carbon monoxide in the blood, so causes deficiency of oxygen in the body. Adolescents start use of drugs and alcohol out of curiosity and experimentation, which later becomes addiction. Dependence on the drugs and alcohol is the tendency of the body to show withdrawal symptom on discontinuation of the use. It means if somebody has become addicted to the drugs or alcohol, and when you want to withdraw, body will show certain symptoms which we call as withdrawal symptom or syndrome, because the collection of symptoms are seen. The withdrawal symptoms are anxiety, shakiness, nausea, and sweating. Effect of the drug and alcohol abuse is seen in drop in the academic performance of the students, isolation from their family and friends, aggressiveness, violence, etc. Prevention and control can be done by avoiding undue peer pressure. We must train our students or our surrounding persons to accept the failures in their life, seek help from parents and friends whenever it is required without any hesitation. With this, the chapter is completed. Thank you.